Welcome everybody today to the Sisterhood of Sweat. And my guest today, I'm very super excited to have my mentor, Ann Louise Gittleman, on. And she is the First Lady of Nutrition. She's written over 30 books on diet, detox, the environment. She is a New York Times best-selling author. And I love this woman dearly. She is the person to go to when you are looking about improving your health. She is a wealth of information, and she's beloved by many. She is regarded as a nutritional visionary and health pioneer who has fearlessly stood on the front lines of holistic and integrative medicine. A Columbia University, excuse me, I'm tripping on my words this morning. A Columbia University graduate, Gittleman has been recognized as one of the top 10 nutritionists in the country by Self Magazine and has received the American Medical Writers Association Award for Excellence and the Humanitarian Award from the Cancer Control Society. And you guys can connect with Ann Louise at annlouise.com or on Facebook at annlouise.com. Welcome the beautiful Ann Louise to the Sisterhood of Sweat.
And it's so nice to be with you, Linda. You're looking wonderful and you're sweating it up as usual in only the best way. So I'm so delighted to be with you. What have you been up to?
Well, let's see. Well, I kicked caffeine this week.
Wonderful.
I kicked coffee to the curb, and after just 2 days of this, no headaches I can report, but a full night's sleep without interruption.
You know, that's a wonderful, wonderful claim to fame. However, this is what's so radical about my new book, Radical Metabolism. I actually did some new research about coffee and caffeine, and for some people, it's actually a very healing beverage. Very good to maintain lean muscle mass for those of us that are exercising with you every single day. It's also very important to slash diabetes and high blood pressure. So for many out there, the right kind of coffee that's mold-free, organic, no pesticides can be a lifesaver. So if caffeine is something that you need to stay away from, you might consider a caffeine-free purity coffee. Just a little tidbit for you.
Awesome. What if you have, why I had to lower it is I had extremely high cortisol. What do you think about that?
Well, cortisol is that hormone, which is the stress hormone, and it's secreted when you're under any kind of stress, whether it's emotional, physiological, or physical stress. But what people don't realize, Linda, and I touch upon in Radical Metabolism, if you're using a lot of Wi-Fi and cellular phones, and you know you're sleeping with a smart meter in your house, you're going to be secreting an inordinate amount of cortisol as well. So there's an environmental hidden cause of that high cortisol, and what I would personally do is get back on your cran water, which you and I discussed, which is so healthy in terms of reducing the physiological effects of stress. But I would also be limiting my time with Wi-Fi. I would make sure that you turn off your Wi-Fi routers at night, you disable them, no Wi-Fi or electrical devices in your bedroom, and go back to a caffeine-free coffee like the Purity that I mentioned, which will give you all the polyphenols and antioxidants you need without that caffeine that could be doing all kinds of ups and downs with your cortisol levels as well. So there are many different causes. It's multifaceted in this day and age. I personally like an adrenal formula for the high cortisol so that you're not secreting too much or too little. You've kind of got that sweet spot.
Well, you guys, all you guys listening out there, you're going to want to get your notebooks out and begin to take notes, because Ann Louise is going to be giving you all types of secrets today to boost your metabolism that you may have never heard before. So I want to ask you, why did you write this book with a previous New York Times bestseller that's still selling?
That's a good question. Now, why did I write this book? It's because, Linda, there is so much new research out there that I felt that women that were known as slow losers or were over the age of 40 were not losing weight the way they did before. And I discovered that a high-fat diet is probably the way to go. But, you know, I've been writing about high fat for decades. But if you can't metabolize the fat, or you don't have a gallbladder, or you have congested bile, which we talk about in the book and we'll talk about a little later, then you're not getting all the value from your fat-burning metabolism. So it's not a matter of eating more fats. You have to digest it and utilize it. And half the women out there without a gallbladder are not doing so. So I felt compelled to get up to speed on those issues and to write about the diets that are failing, why nobody should be going on keto long term, why the primal and the paleo diets are the basic right way to go, but there needs to be some tweaks. And I talk about the right fats, the wrong fats, and how you need the essential fatty acids from the omega-6s that everybody has been demonizing over the past 20 years. So I have to set the record straight and rewrite the rules of nutrition, and I do that within the book. So you have to revamp your fats, number one, so that you get the essential fats from the omega-6 for your skin, for your hair, for your nails, for your gut, for your GERD, for your H. pylori. That's why I talk about bringing back omega-6. And it's a very radical thing, Linda, because nobody's talking about it, but is the focus of radical metabolism.
How important is it to balance your omega-6s in your 3s and not take too much of one over the other?
It's incredibly important. And when we test an omega blood level, we find that omega-6s, the right kind of omega-6s, are deficient, definitively deficient. So you need the ratio. The ideal ratio, as I write about, is 4-to-1. And that's in favor of omega-6 because you need the 6s for your cellular membrane and for metabolism. It acts as a kind of instigator for dormant brown fat, which is so important for burning calories and for excess energy. So what I'm going to say is, if you haven't heard of hemp seed oil, your new mantra is going to be, for the Sisterhood of Sweat and all of your viewers and fans, the new mantra is hemp, hemp, hooray. You need 1 to 2 tablespoons every day to get your right ratio, because it is the only oil out there. I mean, move over coconut oil and move over olive oil. Bring on the hemp, because it's got the perfect 3-to-1, 4-to-1 ratio of 6/3. And we're definitively deficient in the good omega-6s. When you start adding hemp seed oil, you get beautiful skin, beautiful hair, and you start losing weight because omega-6 is such an important trigger for fat burning. And that's my story, which is a theme that I've written about before, but I never discovered the hemp seed oil until recently. And now we hear all about CBD hemp seed oil, which is so therapeutic for the outside, the inside, for pain relief, for degenerative diseases. And I think hemp has a lot of wonderful healing benefits that we can start employing into our diet right now, today.
Well, I love hemp. I use it faithfully. And so I love how much protein it has in it. Talk about that for a moment.
It's got a perfect array of amino acids. So hemp seed protein is very healthy for people. It's a vegetarian source of your calcium. So many of the important minerals that you're losing if you're not eating enough fruits and vegetables and carbohydrates, which is very silly because as females, we need carbohydrates for our hormones. So the hemp seed oil in my book, literally and figuratively, is used with salads. You use it with salads because you don't want to heat up an omega-6 essential fatty acid oil. So you're taking it 1 to 2 tablespoons a day on all raw salads. And when you do, skin conditions like eczema, psoriasis, and unresolved dermatitis will disappear in 2 weeks. It's extraordinary. And I have to tell you a story, if I may. So the story is that I was on some podcast, I think it was Ben Greenfield a while back, and a dermatologist said that he had an individual, he was a holistic dermatologist, which is very difficult to find, but he had a client that came in and had a dermatitis that wouldn't resolve using all kinds of steroids and all other kinds of typical resolutions that traditional dermatologists would give to a client. Within 2 weeks on hemp seed oil, this dermatitis that had taken 3 years to resolve was gone in 2 weeks. And the father comes into the holistic dermatologist. I want to get the story straight. The doctor comes into the father of the young man comes into the holistic dermatologist and says, "I'm really upset." And the holistic dermatologist is looking at this guy, the son with clear skin. He says, "Why are you upset?" He said, "I spent thousands of dollars and nobody told me that it was hemp seed oil that was going to clear up my son's condition." So it's very miraculous. If you're on a diet and you're losing weight, you want hemp because it's high in omega-6, which keeps you tight and toned. So omega-6 to the rescue. Do not believe that omega-6 is the demon out there in terms of oils. It's only when commercial vegetable oils are overly refined, heated, and filled with chemicals that it becomes a toxin. Other than that, it's an absolute necessity for every cell, tissue, and membrane of your body. It's what I call membrane medicine. So bring on the sixes. Hemp is a source of omega-6. Other sources are sesame seed oil. Another source might be safflower seed oil. So those are the big three when it comes to the sixes. I call them the sixes for skin, for sex, and for your membranes.
I love it. I love it. Now, clear up some of the misconceptions on olive oil. Where do we find olive oil that truly is olive oil?
Well, that's a challenge. And olive oil is a wonderful oil. Don't get me wrong. It's just not a source of the essential fatty acids like the flaxseed oil with the 3s and the hemp with the 6s. So you have to make sure that whatever olive oil you're using, it should be labeled 100% extra virgin olive oil, number one. And if it has a certificate from California, even better, number two. A lot of the olive oils that are coming out of Italy, and to some degree, Spain and maybe Greece, can be cut with sunflower seed oil and sometimes even canola oil. So you cannot be sure that it's 100% healing and therapeutic for your body. But when you taste it, you need to get that little burn, that little bitterness in the back of your throat. Then you know that it's got 100% of the polyphenols, which are so healing for your blood pressure, for your heart, and act almost as a pain reliever. So I'm loving olive oil, and I'll give you a hint. There's a brand that we featured at I had a party several weeks ago, and it's the Vervana brand, Vervana. It's from Dr. Stephen Sinatra, who's a personal friend of mine, and he created his own line of olive oils, which is 100% extra virgin with different flavors and different herbs and spices. So I'm in love with this particular olive oil. When I use it for cooking. I use it with my hemp seed oil in my salad dressings. I mix the two together and I get the best of both worlds.
What does olive oil do for you when it is the right olive oil?
It lowers cholesterol levels. It lowers the LDL oxidizing cholesterol. It takes away pain, and it's a high source of antioxidants, which is very important to reduce all of the heart predicting values, whether it's homocysteine to some degree, whether it's C-reactive protein, because that's an inflammatory marker. It's highly anti-inflammatory. And you know something, most people, regardless of your blood type or metabolism, can tolerate olive oil, and the taste is just divine. I mean, I probably partake in olive oil on a daily basis. I adore it. I may make some sourdough bread that somebody makes for me. I don't actually make bread myself, but I'll get some sourdough bread, eat the crust, and just use it as an excuse to dunk it into the real olive oil from Vervana. So it's my favorite oil on the planet, next to hemp seed oil, of course, and it can be used in such a variety of ways. You can use it topically, Linda, as well.
Wow, that is so awesome. Now, when you're eating sourdough bread, is it true that this is also a probiotic?
Yes, if it's the real sourdough, it's a probiotic. And if it's made with wheat, of course, we want the GMO-free wheat. We want the wheat that perhaps comes from Italy that's certified. And you know that the process of sourdough, of making the sourdough, will neutralize the gluten component of the wheat. So I feel it's a very important probiotic. And there's nothing like real sourdough. It seems to satisfy this primal urge that we have to eat a little bit of bread, the right kind of bread, of course.
Wow, I love talking about the good fats, and you were the first one to really toot them out and be like, we need to be eating more fat and none of this high protein, low carb, no fat diets. And we've kind of went the full gamut here. Can you kind of tell everybody how you were talking about good fat forever and everybody was just on this other kick?
Well, I saw early on when I was the director of nutrition at the Pritikin Center, and this was in the early 80s, and everybody was still on they're on the high carbohydrate kick. You know, everything that had fat was bad. Nuts and seeds were demonized, no avocado, no olive oil, everything dry, fat-free was the king. And I saw at the Pritikin Center as the director of this program that people were coming to see me with problems with their hair, their skin, their nails, the first signs of essential fatty acid deficiency. So I tell them to go and get some olive oil. I didn't know very much back then, but then their hair, their skin, their nails improved to some degree. I did some research, and I learned that we actually needed a certain kind of fat in the diet from the essential fatty acid families, the 3s and the 6s, because your body doesn't make these fats on its own. So I wrote about it in a book in 1988 called Beyond Pritikin, which was quickly slayed. I was labeled a heretic. Boston Globe took aim, I think the New York Times. But I knew I was on the right track because people were getting healthier on so many levels, including their immune systems when they added the right kind of fat back. So that was the beginning of my career where I've really stood on the front lines of nutrition. I've challenged conventional medicine. And, you know, I've been vindicated in this day and age because everybody has now gone the other way with 70% fat diets. I was talking way back then in the good old days about 30 to 40% fat. They thought that was ridiculous and heretical, but now it's 70% fat and they're kind of accepting it in terms of the keto model. But that's too much for people that can't absorb it, metabolize it, or don't have a gallbladder. So balance is the key, and we've come full round, which is why I wrote Radical Metabolism, to talk about a balanced diet, what you need with what kind of fats, and how coconut and butter are not the only fats you should be partaking in. That's part of the story, but not all that you need to know.
Wow, I love it. I love it. Well, what about, I was reading in your book a great study on CLA and how the men lost, just taking CLA, doing nothing else, like an inch around their midsection, and women, I think maybe an inch and a half. Like, this is amazing. Tell us about the research.
Well, we know from the research about CLA, which is conjugated linoleic acid, that used to be part of our diets when we ate a lot of raw butter and cream. It's actually an omega-6. It's considered a critical fatty acid from the omega-6 family. That's the weight loss essential fatty acid, as I've been saying. But they don't really know how it works, Linda. We just know that it works. It is able to access stored body fat for energy. It can turn fat into muscle so that when you lose weight and start regaining it, you add some omega-6 CLA to the diet and you don't gain as much fat and sagging muscles. You need to take anywhere, however, from 3,000 to 6,000 milligrams a day to get the therapeutic dose. And when my people don't lose weight on 3,000, I immediately up it to 6,000 mgs, and voila, inches start to disappear, and you don't have to change your thing. It's almost like snake oil, quite frankly. You don't change your diet, you don't change your exercise routine, your body starts metabolizing fat. And I learned about this, and I guess it was confirmed for me many years ago when I started exploring what I called the omega-6 connection to weight loss and health and skin and the sexual functioning. And I was lecturing somewhere in California with my big book, which was called The Fat Flush Plan, and a gal was in a wheelchair, and she said to me, I need to lose weight, I can't exercise. What can I do to get my weight off? And I said, why don't you try CLA? The research seemed to be very compelling even in those days. And this must have been in the 80s, early 90s, I think. And this gal came back to see me a week later at another return engagement at a health food store, and she had lost 2 inches from her waist. And Linda, the gal was wheelchair bound, and so she was not able to exercise, but it was so thrilling to see that she was able to do something to get her weight in the realm that she felt was healthy for her size and her age. And so from there on in, I go up to 6,000 milligrams a day when I need to really do a fast fix, kind of an overnight quick fix, so to speak, to get my weight or my inches in order, and it works every time. So it's really a hidden weight gain gem. So it's CLA, conjugated linoleic acid. It's 3,000 to 6,000 milligrams. We sell it at Unikey, which is the company I've represented for over 25 years. And it's one of the best-selling products because it works and nobody knows about it. So I'm glad that we're talking about it.
Wow. I mean, this is fascinating information today for everybody. And I just want to say, guys, Ann Louise just had a birthday. I'm not sure if I'm allowed to say the age, but
oh, you can.
All right. She is 70, and 70. She is sharp as a tack and looks like a movie star. Now, I want to subscribe to whatever it is you're doing because it shows. It shows. And I know I was reading that GLA was a big thing that you use in the book. Can you tell us why you use it and how it made your skin just so glowing?
Well, it's like alphabet soup. We have the CLA, now we have the GLA, and they're both in the same essential fatty acid family, Linda. They're both omega-6s. But the CLA research showed targets tummy fat more successfully. The GLA is very good for the skin. So I'm a believer in about 360 milligrams or more for the skin, the CLA for the tummy, and I kind of live on that. There's one more fat, however, that's the secret sauce of this book, and you may have read about it. It's the pine nut oil. And just the way CLA loses weight on the outside and the GLA is so helpful for the skin on the outside, the pine nut oil on the inside will regenerate your torn esophagus, your irritated, agitated esophagus. It'll heal the mucous membranes from your mouth to your bottom, so to speak. And it does it in 3 weeks' time because it contains an essential fatty acid that's very similar to the omega-6 fatty acid in GLA and CLA. So you got pine nut oil for the inside, GLA for the skin, CLA for the tummy fat. And by adding these supplements or oils, you can regenerate your system from the inside out. I personally live on pine nut oil. It's Siberian pine nut oil. And the recipe that I write about in the book can be found in the book. I'm not going to give you all the secrets. We'd like you all to actually get radical metabolism, but it has been sensational to get rid of GERD. And what else are my people saying? And H. pylori, which is the bacteria that can create ulcerated duodenums or in the stomach. You can get a stomach ulcer. It's exceedingly healing for the inside. So discovering the good omega-6s that haven't been altered by heat, air, or light is one of the secrets of radical metabolism. And it's, again, one of the reasons that I had to reiterate that message for a whole new, I'd say, generation of dieters that didn't know about my work in the past. I started writing in the late 80s, for example, and have come full round, but they're doing these diets which are not quite right on track because they're affecting your hormones. So I take a little bit of an aim at keto in the book, a little bit of an aim at the Other one is paleo, because they've got basically correct information, but the fats have to be revamped. And that's one of my rules in here: revamp your fats the radical metabolism way.
I love it. I love it. Well, let's dive into a couple more things out of the book. What is for breakfast on radical metabolism?
So we have my blaster. It's an energy blaster, which I call the citrus blaster. And we take coffee, and in your case, it could be the caffeine-free coffee, which is the mold-free, pesticide-free, high polyphenol. Purity is the one that I talk about because it's the healthiest coffee in the land. Healthiest coffee in the land. Or you could take I think we use dandelion root tea as well because it's so healing for the liver. We give you a scoop of whey protein, very good because of the glutathione connection and the antioxidants. And then you're going to be adding a little coconut milk to give it a little froth. You'll be adding some herbs and spices, maybe a little cinnamon, a little cardamom, good for the liver, maybe a little bit of stevia to kind of sweeten things up. And that's your morning beverage, because coffee is a weight loss bitter. And I talk about that a lot in the book. It will actually help to detoxify your system. And there's so much research about coffee being a cancer preventative that I felt obligated to review my stance on coffee, and I added it to the protocol for the morning drink. So it's a great drink. People use it every morning. Sometimes they put in more of the protein powder, which is our fat flush whey protein. Sometimes they put in more, just to get the extra protein bump. But it's got the fat, the protein, moderate carbohydrates, and that's how we start the day.
I love it. And so you're using whey protein and you're putting this in the coffee, or the Purity?
Purity is the coffee. That's the coffee brand that I recommend because it's the healthiest I could find anywhere, because it's mold-free, which is a real important aspect. A lot of coffees are loaded with mold and people don't recognize it. It's pesticide-free, and you need to have an organic coffee or you're drinking a cup of pesticides. And you're using the protein because the whey protein is very therapeutic because it gives you satiety, number one, and it also helps to rebuild muscle, number two. So that's the reason I use the whey protein. We also have a fat flush body protein, which you could also use, but I personally like the whey because it makes it more like a milkshake.
Oh, sounds delicious.
It is, it works. But the missing part of it that I didn't share was that we take the rind of a citrus fruit. It could be an orange, it could actually be a lemon, and there's a ton of vitamin C in there. You get ready-made vitamin C, which is a precursor to glutathione, and you need that to detoxify all the heavy metals in the environment. So you add that to it. It's actually quite delicious. So that's my citrus blaster, and we blast off with energy, all the functions that you need, all the elements that you need for weight loss and to stabilize your blood sugar. So it's a great way to start your day.
That sounds great. I mean, I'm all for it. I'm definitely I've got the book, I got the Audible. I'm gonna be diving into some of these recipes, and we all need a change now and then.
Yes.
Tell us about some of the myths that you have busted in this book.
So the myths, we talk about, the big myth is the omega-6 myth, and that omega-6s are bad, because you'll see that rehashed with even the nutritional experts that don't bother to do their original thinking. I mean, omega-6s are good if they're not exposed to heat, air, and light, as I've said, but omega-3s could be exposed to heat, air, and light and be just as deleterious. So it has nothing to do with the oil itself. It has to do with the processing of the oil that's so key. So that's one of them. The other myth, which is a biggie that I'll share, is that I think you need to reevaluate the pots and pans that you're using. Because if you're using a lot of iron, for example, and you haven't taken a stored iron or ferritin test, you could be harming your heart, your skin, your liver, and your brain, and kind of making way for many of the degenerative diseases that people get when they reach 70 years old and even younger in this day and age. So we're really telling people to cast the cast iron unless they know what their iron levels are. That's a big myth, and very surprising to many who think that cooking in cast iron is the healthiest method of all.
Oh, I'll have to tell my mom after this because she always told me to cook with cast iron if I was low on iron.
If you're low in iron, it's one thing. But if you've got too much, as people start to stockpile after they get to the menopausal stage of life, or they're men over the age of 40, then you got a problem. That's where testing comes into play. You have to test your ferritin levels. So all of your viewers and all of your listeners need to test ferritin, and then follow my instructions in Radical Metabolism. Just that one thing could possibly save your life.
Wow, I love that, because I think a lot of us don't realize that we do stop losing iron in menopause, and that we don't need it as much as we used to.
You don't need it. And the latest research is now showing, and I'm working on another book about longevity, so I know this kind of intimately. The latest research shows that there may be a connection between iron stockpiling and your brain, and Alzheimer's and all of the degenerative diseases that we do not have any kind of resolution for. So be careful with what you do. There are lots of ways to get rid of the iron, but the way that we know the best is to stop cooking in cast iron unless you exactly know what your ferritin levels are. The ferritin measures your stored iron, and I believe that in this book I actually give you the ideal levels that you want, and it's very different than what a typical blood test will reveal.
I love it. Now, let's talk a little bit about what we were touching on earlier, with bile being really important and how it can get sluggish and congested. Why do we need to change the story, and why is bile important to us?
Well, nobody talks about bile, but bile is a very sexy subject, quite frankly, because we have to think of bile as to make it as important as probiotics. Now, why is bile important? Well, for the simple reason that, number one, it breaks down fats into small components. So it is made in the liver and stored in the gallbladder. So you need the right components to break down fats so that they're usable for energy and the essential fatty acids for all of your tissues and your glands and your cells. Number two, it helps to flush out toxins. So it is the repository for all of your toxins, including estrogen. So if you have clogged bile, which is loaded up with too much cholesterol or too many toxins or pesticides or plastics or this, that, and the other, because it's a toxic waste dump, then your body will not be recycling and metabolizing estrogen into its non-toxic metabolites. And then number three, in the process of breaking down fats, the bile itself is a key to thyroid health. So keeping your bile flowing and uncongested and unclogged is very important. You do that with bitters, and you do that with all the nutrients that I talk about in the book. And it's made a huge difference with individuals that have hypothyroidism. It's a missing link, again, that you'll only find in Radical Metabolism.
So the bitters are going to help get some of this sludge moving and kind of get the bile secreting better?
Yeah, and we're not into bitters in the American diet, but you've got bitter herbs, you've got bitter greens, you've got bitter fruits. It's why grapefruit used to be so well known as a detox and weight loss fruit. It's because of the bitter component in the grapefruit. So I talk about that and how we have to put it back on the dinner plate and where you can get your bitters from. So bitters are better. That's another mantra to remember.
I love that. What about lemon? Is that going to help us get our bile going? Or
yeah, it's a bitter. Lemon is a bitter, lime is a bitter, the grapefruit that I talked about. There are a ton more that you read about in the book, but coffee is a primary bitter, which is why it's so therapeutic if we can rethink the caffeine and get the caffeinated version of the healthy coffee.
And they've got to get away from the over 200 pesticides that are in coffee when you're just buying it out somewhere, if it's not organic and it's not the type that doesn't have the bird caca and the, all the bad stuff, on it.
No, it's so true. People don't realize it's a big cash crop, so they spray it. They spray coffee crops. This particular company, and I did a lot of research for my book, the Radical Metabolism, the particular company that I only promote, there's just one, and I've seen all their research. I've met with the top brass there. They search the world for the highest antioxidant, highest polyphenol, highest chlorogenic acid-based coffee for weight loss and therapeutic purposes, and they do a marvelous job. And people that taste the coffee find that it's delicious. And I think if you go to I think it's on my website. It's on annlouise.com. You'll see under our partners, we have a little special offer for all newcomers to Purity Coffee. But it's well worth it. It's become a favorite among my fans.
I love that. I know a lot of my girls listening at the studio are going to be looking that Purity Coffee up.
And they're going to thank you, and they'll thank me because it actually tastes good. It's very clean, and that's what everybody has said. It's very clean tasting. So it was a real find to be able to have people that could still enjoy America's favorite drink, but do so in a healthful manner. And if you look on the Purity website, you'll see all kinds of research. It's mind-boggling.
Well, we're working on lowering inflammation right now and lowering cortisol because my sweet group is between 40 to 55. And how important is that?
Well, here's the deal. The most anti-inflammatory elements in the diet are the omega-6 fatty acids. That's where the CLA comes into play in the GLA. They're potent anti-inflammatory. So when you go on my program, you've got a tremendously anti-inflammatory diet. We don't have a lot of grains on the program, which are highly inflammatory for many people. We don't use a lot of dairy unless it's organic, which can be healing for some. And we absolutely take away all of the inflammatory elements of most diets. So you don't have any pesticides, no hormones, you're glyphosate free as much as possible. And you've got healing herbs and spices. I mean, we load up on turmeric, we load up on ginger, we load up on garlic. So this is a primary anti-inflammatory diet, and inflammation is the root cause of a lot of disease, but you have to get to the root cause of the inflammation and what's causing it. So we try to do that within the nature of the program. It's built in to detoxify on a daily basis using that coffee drink that we talked about, my citrus blaster. Because I think detoxification, Linda, is a daily event now. It's not just a seasonal occurrence.
Because we're living in a toxic world.
Increasingly toxic world. I mean, there's no doubt about it. And I sometimes work with my team on my Facebook posts, and there's new things to talk about every day in terms of the newest toxin of the day, because there's something new every day. But you really have to recognize that the EMFs, this is full circle now to what we talked about in the beginning, they are very they're an invisible toxin that can impact that cortisol, because when your body is exposed to EMFs, your cell phone, the smart meter, your iPad, you are secreting, anytime your body comes in contact with a non-ionizing radiation, you're secreting up to 20 heat shock proteins, which are inflammatory to some degree. So your cortisol levels are constantly being challenged. Your adrenals are constantly being challenged. So you've got to work on normalizing them and keeping them balanced. And you can do that with all the elements that we talk about in radical metabolism. So it's good not just for weight loss, it's good for overall health.
How important are probiotics? Do you just do it through your food? Should we supplement? What's your take on this?
I think prebiotics may be more important than probiotics. I mean, if we need the big guns, then we've got wonderful products out there. Dr. Ohhira's, I was a spokesperson for them many years, is still a go-to with people that have all kinds of problems with their digestion, or they may have acquired or been exposed to some sort of bacteria that is not being resolved properly with the use of healthy antibiotics, in the natural medicine community. But I really think for a lot of people, and this is based on new research that's come out, that you need to get the prebiotics, lots of fiber in the diet, which a ketogenic diet is missing, but radical metabolism puts back into play, so that your body can make its own probiotics. And that's where fibers from jicama come in handy. That's where the whey protein comes in handy, and a lot of fruits and vegetables. So plant fibers are very important to make your probiotics. I don't think it's imperative for everybody to use probiotics the way we used to think on a daily basis based on the new research. So fiber is here to stay. That to me is just as important as a probiotic, maybe more so.
Wow, that's pretty
radical.
Amazing.
It's pretty radical.
I have some online questions from Susan Eisworth. She wants to know, what about forks over knives, suggesting that all oil is cardiac cholesterol causing?
I think it's misconstrued and they're in error. They're in great error. So if you read my book, Susan, Radical Metabolism, you'll see where the error is. I think that's very simplistic and simply not correct.
Awesome, awesome. And she also asks, she's having trouble with bloating. What can she do for that?
Bloating oftentimes is a digestive issue. You've got to check your HCl, your HCl, which is your hydrochloric acid. I'd like to know what blood type our Susan is. It sounds like she's an A blood type because she liked that vegetarian slant on things. Susan, what is your blood type? Do we know, Linda?
She's not answering, but if she comes back with that, I'll let you know.
So if you're bloating a little bit, I just want to know your blood type just because it'll help me out a little bit here. But the bloating can be handled with fennel tea. I think that's a natural, good way, very gentle on the system. It would be very good. Papaya seeds would be helpful, and a little bit of vinegar and water if you can tolerate it. Apple cider vinegar and water before meals.
She didn't come on and answer about the blood type. So let's go on. I really want to know, a lot of my friends have had their gallbladders out, and my dad always warned that this isn't something you want. Why is that?
It's because you need the gallbladder to store the bile, so there's a timed release of bile appropriately when you're eating fats. If not, the fat circulates, it can become rancid, it can ferment, and that's not the way nature intended. So if you don't have a gallbladder, you need some kind of substitute, which is the bitters that I talk about, the bile salts, which I write about, and certain nutrients, including more choline, inositol, and methionine, which break down fats. So all of that is incredibly important, or you lose the ability to use the essential fatty acids or the vitamin-based vitamin or the oil-based vitamin A and the D and the E and the K. So all of that has a side effect and kind of a domino effect that will affect overall health from the tip of your head to the bottom of your toes. So fats are where it's at, but if you're not digesting and utilizing them, they're doing you no good at all.
So when people are like unable to digest the fat, and they've had their gallbladder out, I know you have some recommendations in the book for that.
So look at the supplement called Bile Builder that I created because I didn't see anything on the market when I wrote the book. Bile Builder has all of the nutrients you need to digest fats and make sure that you do not get a fatty liver. We've got the choline, we've got the beetroot, we've got the bile salts in there, and I think there's a little bit of lipase and some other particular nutrients that are well known to digest fats and can act as a gallbladder support system, kind of like hormone support therapy. And that's what we have to do when you get your gallbladder out. And that's why it's so important for people to recognize that when they're getting their gallbladder out, they need some kind of alternative to the natural bile flow that's occurring in the system. Many people that get their gallbladders out start gaining weight. They get hypothyroidism because there's a thyroid connection to the bile breakdown, and they become constipated because bile is very lubricating for the gut. So when you read the book, pay close attention to restoring your gallbladder function, even if you have a gallbladder. There are a lot of tips and tricks that probably will apply to many of the women out there that are over the age of 40.
What about, I know we were talking about bile. I keep wanting to go back to the bile.
Why? Yeah, you love your bile. Bile is brilliant.
I know it's going to break down the fat, so I know this is an important topic. Why does the sluggish bile affect our thyroid?
It's because in the breaking down of fats, bile triggers an enzyme response from to your thyroid from the T4 to the T3. So it triggers the enzyme to make the T4 transform into usable thyroid, which is T3. Those are hormones that your thyroid has. And without your gallbladder working properly, you do not get that breakdown. There is something brilliant about the way the Creator made our bodies. So why that occurs, I can't tell you, but that it occurs, we can document with research that's come from Harvard and out of Finland, believe it or not. So it's kind of a secret weapon. I was alerted to this years ago when I was doing a summit, Linda, and the doctor at the other end of the summit said, are you noticing when people get their gallbladders out, their thyroids do a deep dive? And I said, yeah, in about 3 months, people become hypothyroid. So I started looking at the research and found that there is this holy or unholy alliance between the bile, your gallbladder, and your thyroid. So if you're having problems, get thee some bile, because bile is beautiful and bile is brilliant.
I love it. Tell everybody why they should buy your book and where they can get it.
So you should buy my book to learn all my secrets. And as it says on the book cover, you can eat your way to a faster metabolism. It's especially good for no to slow losers, people over the age of 40. The secrets work faster for people in their 30s and 20s. And it will help you with easier weight loss, better health, with a diet revolution from a health pioneer. So everything that I've gleaned from my 40 years of working on the front lines is included in this book. You'll have to read it several times or join our Facebook group, which is the Radical Metabolism Revolution. But you'll find some secrets and tips that will not just be good for your weight loss efforts, but that are also anti-aging as well. Getting on the right oils is one of those tricks. Looking at your iron levels is another. And learning how to take the right kind of foods and the proper macro levels is also very important. So if you haven't had luck on a ketogenic diet, if you haven't had luck completely on paleo, Radical Metabolism is definitely the book for you.
I love it. I love it. What are 3 simple tips that you could leave with the audience today?
So you've got to get bitters back in your diet. Bitters are better for digestion, for metabolism, and for overall weight loss. So the biggest bitter that I know of is coffee, like the Purity coffee that I've mentioned, or lemon juice and water first thing in the morning. So that would be number 1. Number 2, get your ratios right. You need 4 to 1 omega-6s to omega-3s, and that would be your hemp seed oil. So the mantra that we mentioned, as you know, Linda, is hemp, hemp, hooray. 1 to 2 tablespoons a day. There's hemp seed oil in every health food store in the country. And then number 3, I would suggest, is that if you're finding that you have inflammation causing issues, then you want to do without grains and consider going on basmati rice, a little bit of sorghum, or even a little bit of millet, which are much more neutral in their lectin creating ability, number 1, and are anti-inflammatory, number 2, because I believe you need a little bit of carbohydrates for satiety and for your hormones. So Radical is the way to go. The Radical Metabolism diet is in there. It's a 21-day plan and a 4-day detox. So I would welcome any and all of your viewers and listeners to join us online at annlouise.com.
And I know we have some comments still on Facebook, questions, but I'm afraid to open it. So
well, why don't we take 3 more questions? We'll do it really quickly and then we'll say adieu.
All right. Let me just look really quickly. I'm afraid to open it on the internet, however, after what happened a few minutes ago. Let's see here. I think we have... Now it's not pulling up. Let's see. Yeah. Okay.
Technology.
I see it now. Yeah, my husband was like, we can't hear it. Okay, so blood type O.
Oh, there you go. So she's an O. So she's too acidic. So her issue, this little Susan is too acidic. A lot of O's get too acidic. So she would need to actually do more lemon and water, which would be good for her. And she has to add some salt to her routine, more salt. She needs a little bit more salt, Linda.
Okay. All right. I'll make sure she finds
you
out
make sure
about
she
that.
knows that.
And then I had another question. How much is too much exercise?
More than 1 hour of I don't want to say cardio, of endurance or extreme exercise, you start to go, the benefits start to go downwards. You start to do a deep dive into a negative situation. I wouldn't exercise, how do we say this, intently or intensely for more than an hour a day.
Okay. And so should they have a rest day, or is it all right to work out every day for an hour?
I think you have to work out different muscles every day, every day. You need at least a 48-hour period of rest between different body sections. That would be number one. And number two, you have to look at the research that was done at the Cooper Clinic. You know, Kenneth Cooper, the father of aerobics, he found that all these endurance athletes came down at a fairly early age with all kinds of degenerative diseases because they used up their supply of antioxidants. So if a little is good, it doesn't mean a lot is better. And I know that you know that personally, Linda.
Oh yeah, for sure. You can't work out the same muscle groups every day. You've got to give them rest because you're continually tearing them down, and you've got to give them a chance to build back up. That otherwise you're breaking
it's all
it
common
down.
sense. Exactly. Yeah. It's just we have to learn to have some common sense.
Well, the last question comes from Trisha Bills. She wants to know how often she should detox.
Well, I don't know what you mean by that. If you mean a cleanse, I wouldn't do it more than once every 3 months, an intensive cleanse. Do it according to the seasons. You do a seasonal cleanse in the spring, fall, winter, and which season in summer, and you should focus on I talk about the 4-day cleanse here, which is a juice cleanse. It's the only time I recommend a juice cleanse is in this book. And you should do something to clean out and support your liver on a daily basis. And that's why you take that drink that we talked about in the course of our discussion. That's where the citrus blaster comes into play. So a little bit of detox for the liver and the gallbladder on a daily basis, a big time cleanse once every season. And that's my story.
Yeah, that is perfect. Perfect. So detox every day, cleanse basically every 3 to 4 months. So 4 times a year at least, right?
Yes.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much. I really enjoyed the conversation and seeing you, and it's just been a highlight. And I just want to thank you so much for being so well vested in all of the subjects of health.
My pleasure. And I'm just so glad that the Sisterhood of Sweat is alive and well and still kicking. And I'm so proud of you, Linda. Lots of love to you and yours.
Thank you so much. And thanks, everybody, for listening to the Sisterhood of Sweat.